this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate a mirrored version of the knit front back increase that places the new stitch to the right of the original stitch rather than to the left. If you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, tap or mouse over the video playback area of the screen to see the video timeline, where you will find chapter titles and starting points for each section of the video. There are also direct links down in the video description. I have two swatches here that simulate the typical sorts of raglan seam lines that you might see in a top-down raglan sweater. This one has a single column of knit stitches and it is flanked by knit front back increases on either side. You can see the telltale bumps of the knit front back increases. What's really common in this sort of scenario is that the stitches in the seam line kind of alternate between being large, small, all the way up. So this, combined with those bumps of the knit front back increases, is just kind of expected and it's typical, but that uneven tension in the seam line can bother some knitters. So in this green swatch, you can see I have essentially the same increase set up with the knit front back flanking on each side, but this column of stitches is very even. This one uses a 2-column seam line. In this 2-column version, the stitches are much more even relative to each other, and you do see a little bit of the enlarge, smaller in that second column of stitches. What you'll see in this green swatch is that, like the previous green swatch, it has more even tension in the stitches of the seam line compared to the blue one. Now this one is not terrible and you might find it acceptable, but some knitters may prefer something that is more even. The green swatches were knit using 2 types of knit front back increases. On the right hand side, the standard knit front back increase was used, but on the left side over here, a mirrored version of that knit front back increase was worked, and that is what I'm going to show you today. What I have on the needles right now is a swatch that it's in progress that has that single column of knit stitches, and you'll see that these are the even looking stitches. They don't alternate between being enlarged and smaller. But this is a typical setup for these types of raglan increases, is that you will be told to work up to the marker, and in that stitch before the marker you'll be told to do a knit front back, slip the marker, and then afterwards you'll be told to knit front back into the first stitch after that. So what we're going to do is a little bit different. So here I am approaching the marker. So I want you to note that below this stitch on the needle, you'll see that we have that bump from a knit front back. This means I'm going to be working this increase into the most recently created column of stitches. So this column of stitches was created the last time I did an increase row. So I'm going to work the standard knit front back into this stitch right before the marker. I'm going to slip the marker, but instead of working a knit front back into this column of stitches, I'm just going to knit it. And now you'll see here is a stitch again with the bump below the needle. So this is the column of stitches that was created the last time I worked an increase row. So rather than working a regular knit front back, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get rid of this yarn for a second so you can see what I'm doing and focus on that. I'm going to slip the stitch as if to knit. So that changes the stitch mount. It puts the leading leg, the leg closest to the stitch on the right, over the back of the needle, and the trailing leg, which is the stitch closest to the next stitch on the needle, over the front. And now I want to return that stitch back to the left needle, and I want to maintain that stitch mount. So you can see that the leading leg is closest to the tip and it's hanging over the back. Now I'm going to knit into the front of this stitch. And I do that by coming across here, knit into the front, and then I'm going to wrap the yarn or pick it however I knit. So the yarn's going to come around just like a regular stitch. I'm going to drop this yarn again so it doesn't distract you. And as it comes off the needle, what you'll see is that you have created a twisted stitch. And you can see this leg that's in the front. You're going to use your left needle and come from behind it, pick it up, and put it on the needle. And now you'll see this stitch, this loop that's on the needle has, again, the leading leg over the back and the trailing leg over the front. This time you want to work into the back, so against that leading leg right here. And then again, we wrap or pick it like we would for any knit stitch and bring it back through. So now what we have done is we have created a knit front back where the new stitch is to the right of the original stitch. So we still have those bumps, those new columns of stitches right next to this seam line, but we've done the second one by mirroring a standard knit front back increase. Okay, I'm on another right side row as I'm approaching the marker. Remember, it's got the increased column that we just created last time. We work our knit front back into that column. Slip the marker. We just knit this seam line stitch. And now we have another one of those columns that was created the last time. And this is the one where we're going to use the mirrored knit front back that creates the new column to the right. And again, we do that by slipping as if to knit, returning the stitch to the left needle, knitting it through the front so that it twists. And as this comes off the needle, we can just let that left needle drop and scoop up that leg that's crossed in front. And then we knit through again. I'm going to work a few more along here just so that you can see what they look like. Slip as if to knit, return the stitch, knit through the front. As it comes off the needle, let your left needle grab that leg that's crossed in front and then knit through the back. You're knitting this one so that this doesn't twist. I'm going to do this one more time. Slip. I'm going to do it with the yarn in my right hand because I know that some people get distracted by that. So slip as if to knit, return back. So it's mounted differently on the needle with the leading leg over the back, knit through the front. And the result is a twisted stitch. So you're taking that crossed front leg and you're picking it up with your left needle and you're knitting it so that it doesn't twist. So you always want to knit against the leading leg to create an untwisted stitch. And then that's how you complete it. So you get that bump to the right of each of those. So this is a completed swatch, but you can see that in this scenario, if these were on the needles and this was the marker that was on the needle, you would do the same thing. You would come up and in this stitch before the marker, you would work your regular knit front back, slip the marker, then you would knit both of those knit stitches as they are, and then you would create your mirrored knit front back into the next stitch. So these seam line stitches are just kept as knit stitches. You don't work a knit front back into any of those. So the reason that the tension ends up better in both of these examples is two reasons. One is that you're not working sequential knit front back increases. You have at least one column of stitches separating them. And then the second thing is that for this scenario, you are always creating the new stitch into the most recently created column. You're never working into the same column of stitches over and over and over and over again. So with the raglan increases, what I was showing you is that you're always doing increases in the same place, adjacent to the same column of stitches. But that's not always the situation you might be in. You might be in something that's quite different. Here's a situation in which this area that's getting larger, the increases are always at the edge. So I've got these two markers. This is kind of simulating a thumb gusset. You can just pretend there's a bunch of stitches in the round on either side of these markers. In this kind of scenario, you want to create an increase right next to each of the markers. So you would knit up to the marker, you'd slip the marker, and you've got that column of stitches that was created last time you did an increase row. But this time you are going to, in this first increase, you're going to create the mirrored knit front back so that the bump will occur to the right of this stitch. So you're doing it in the most recently created column, and you want the increase to appear to the right. So in this case, you have to do the mirrored one. So you slip as if to knit, return back to the left needle, knit through the front, and then as it comes off the needle, you can catch that front leg that's twisted here in order to knit through that. And now you're going to knit all the way until you have one stitch remaining before that next marker. So we get to that stitch, and again, that was the column of stitches that was most recently created. So you knit into the front and then the back, and the new stitch is created to the left of the existing stitch. And then you can slip your marker and continue on. Every increase has advantages and disadvantages, and every increase can be invisible in some stitch patterns, but highly visible in others. While the mirrored knit front back improves stitch tension along the increase lines, the knit front back is more visible than other increases, such as the make one or lifted increases. This visibility is considered decorative by some, but unappealing by others. Experiment with different increases to see what you prefer in different situations and when using different stitch patterns. The two videos linked over here will give you some other options. This video topic was suggested in the comments of a previous video. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.